Sometimes music makes us dream of an eternal home that we're always longing for.
Once there was a way to get back homeward.
Sometimes it's raw nature that tricks us into getting our hopes up that we could be part of the beauty we see. Oh no, we're still us. This next group of pictures has the same effect with an added element. Do you see it? It's the added suggestion of community, society, relationships of love and intimacy. It's the kind of place you'd like to go to, not just to visit, but to live in and belong to. It's like they present not just physical perfection, but suggest the perfect home, an attempt to tap into our innate desire for community, our desire for relationships of love and intimacy. When I say community, I mean like a group of people, family or friends bound together by memories in relationships of love and intimacy. Kind of like this scene from the movie Garden State.
Maybe that's all family really is. A group of people that miss the same imaginary place.
Forever family. I once saw this post about this group trying to find an adoptive home for an abandoned dog. Somewhere in the story, the author described the process as trying to find the dog's forever family. The longing for home is a longing for a forever family. It's this longing for a perfect home of loving relationships that explains why we're so captivated, not only by pictorial depictions of home, but word pictures of home. I mean, continuing stories of communities where everybody knows your name and they're always glad you came.
Taking your way in the world today.
Got you with that one. Got you with a funny joke. But seriously, that's just a reference from a popular 80s sitcom about a group of people who regularly meet together, enjoying each other's company and doing life at a bar called Cheers. It's just a quick way to point out that as powerfully as these pictures suggest home and community, other formats, other types of pictures like word pictures, books or movies and TV can go a lot further in representing relationships of love and intimacy, and that's why we're drawn to them. Real home is more than just music or natural beauty. Real home is a community. It's the special kind of circle of friends where if you let someone know that you were lonely or needed some kind of help or had some kind of joy in your life to share, the response would always be, I couldn't resist doing that again. We're drawn toward artistic and written representations of community because we're hardwired for community. And we're hardwired for community because community, relationships of love, are at the center of the universe and are, in fact, the meaning of life. You know what it's like? It's like that scene threaded throughout the movie Gladiator, the one where he dreams about his home, his wife, and his son every once in a while.
Tell me about your home. My house is in the hills above Tohila. Very simple place. Pink stones that warm in the sun. Kitchen garden that smells of herbs in the day. Jasmine in the evening. Through the gate is a giant poplar. Figs, apples, pears, the soil, Marcus, black like my wife's hair. Grapes on the south slopes, olives on the north. Wild ponies playing in my house. They tease my son, he wants to be one of them.
And then, horror of horrors, it turns out that we have to sit through and watch as that very home, that forever family, is burned and extinguished right before our very eyes. And yet, at the end, when he's killed, he's shown as returning to them. And our hearts are lifted as we say and think to ourselves, yes, that's the way it's supposed to be. Happy ending. Happy ending. There's more truth to that than you might think. That turn of events hits us all up in our feels because we're hardwired to hope for such a reception for ourselves and for our loved ones when it's our turn to pass. This, of course, brings us to the Mac Daddy of all communities, the Mac Daddy of a set of friends, the Mac Daddy of all forever families. You like how I keep using the phrase Mac Daddy? Just another one of the ways I like to show how I can relate to the young people, like, you know, the ones with their hippity hop culture and their whooped up Magnum style music.
Open Gangnam Style.
Okay, I'm gonna need you guys to try to focus on what I'm talking about. The Mac Daddy of all homes, the Mac Daddy of all forever family, the one where all loving relationships find their source, is the God of the Bible. Let me give you some examples. You judge for yourself. In Matthew 26, we read of Jesus telling his disciples that his soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. And in the very next verse, we read how he takes that sorrow to his Father in prayer, which is just a fancy word or saying for he poured out his sorrow to his Father. Is that not like the relational dynamic that I spoke of before? Real home is a community. It's the special kind of circle of friends where if you let someone know that you were lonely, the response would always be. There's another example in the first chapter of Mark. It's the day that Jesus is baptized and starts his public ministry. And we read of the Holy Spirit not only being there for him, but also descending on him like a dove. And there's the Father there also publicly speaking the following words over him. You are my Son, whom I love. With you I am well pleased. Isn't that just like the dynamic of relationship that I spoke of before? Real home is a community. It's the special kind of circle of friends where if you let someone know or had some kind of joy in your life to share, the response would always be. These stories clearly describe the interior life of God as being very much like what we see in community. In reflecting on this insight, a guy named Timothy Keller says, if, from all eternity, without end and without beginning, ultimate reality is a community of persons knowing and loving one another, then ultimate reality is about love relationships. At this point, I should probably say a few words about the elephant that is in the video, the idea that God is a Trinity. I'm not going to pretend that I have my head completely wrapped around the idea that God is three distinct persons in one being, but I do think it would be helpful to consider the following point that C.S. Lewis made in his attempt to think through it. As you advance to more real and more complicated levels, like from human to God, you do not leave behind you the things you found on the simpler levels. You still have them, but combined in new ways, in ways you could not imagine if you knew only the simpler levels. From here, he goes on to present a comparison to the physical world that I will now attempt to reproduce in this video. Now, in order to do this demonstration, we're going to have to step into the laboratory of science. We start by considering what it would be like to live in a simpler world, one that had only two dimensions. In this world, we will be very familiar with figures such as triangles, circles, squares, and we would also be comfortable with the idea of multiples of these figures, multiple squares, multiple triangles. Here's a picture of me and my buddy using multiple two-dimensional figures to make tricked-out rides. Now imagine being visited in the two-dimensional world by someone who told you that at a deeper level, in a three-dimensional world, there existed objects that were actually 6 squares making up one object, making up one figure. It would be like one of those Zen koans. It would blow your mind. And yet when we do move to a fuller, more real, more complex dimension, more complex world, such as a three-dimensional world, it's not at all surprising to find an object that does consist of 6 squares in one object. We call it a cube. As mentally challenging as the idea of God as a community can be, you could also look at it as helpful in that it satisfies our intuition. I mean, how else could God be love? Love is something you have in relationship, right? He couldn't have or be love if you were simply a single person in the way we experience being a single being. There is a real forever family, the Mac Daddy of forever families, the eternal forever family. And we've been invited in, an invitation that was very costly, an invitation that was bought out of love. Now there is a way to get back homeward. Now there is a way to get back home.